Find the perfect ride for you today with the New Year New Ride sales event at Guam Auto Spot. Get behind the wheel of the 2024 Outlander Sport starting at just $22,995 or only $156 per paycheck. Visit GuamAutospot.com or call 671-478-AUTO.
Find a plan that goes with your flow. Get unlimited local talk, text, and data at the most affordable rate with Unlimited Flow Postpaid, only at Docomo Pacific.
Wendy's Guam's new Thin Mints Frosty is here. It's rolled with Wendy's chocolate mint sauce, inspired by the flavor of Girl Scouts Thin Mints. This is no dream, people. Be sure to get your hands on that minty, chocolatey, frosty goodness while you can. The new Thin Mints Frosty won't be around forever, so head on over to Wendy's today. Gotta be Wendy's. Cold Stone Guam's Very Berry Non-Dairy is very berry delicious. This creation is deliciously made with silk chocolate almond milk, strawberries, blueberries, and raspberries. Vegans and non-vegans alike will fall for this plant-based, vegan, dairy-free, and lactose-free frozen dessert made with silk chocolate almond milk. Cold Stone Creamery, the ultimate ice cream experience.
Kandit News is brought to you by 76 Circle K Guam.
Good evening, my dear friends. It's 9:40 p.m. on Wednesday, April 2nd, 2025. My name is Troy Torres. Thank you so much for joining me. I know it's late. I'm very sorry. I just came from a business meeting. Hopefully we're able to gather up some advertisers. I rushed into this. I didn't prepare my dogs, so you're going to hear them in the background barking. And I apologize for that. But let's just get to the serious matter at hand. It's been a decade. It's been 10 years since the first whispers, nearly 10 years since the first whispers of the corruption of the young administration of then Governor Ralph Torres first started. And those whispers were followed up by brave people who had the audacity to stand up by themselves and to be counted among the very few who would challenge, who at that time, a very popular governor. That was followed up by, in the absence of local journalism, that was supposed to have pointed these things out over the past decade. Journalists from 10,000 miles away, journalists with the Palm Beach report out of Florida, journalists with Bloomberg, I believe journalists with the Atlantic, investigating, uncovering, and reporting to the people of the Marianas, the people of the United States, and the people of the world. An intricate network, breadcrumbs, a trail of evidence connecting then Governor Ralph Torres and cronies within his administration, not just to your typical corruption, not just when people say, oh, there's corruption everywhere. Absolutely. Wherever an economy works, wherever there is government and civilization, there is corruption. Absolutely. But this was different. What these national and international journalists uncovered and reported for the whole world to see was a connection from then Governor Ralph Torres and the cronies associated with him, not just to people in power. I'm talking about lobbyists and politicians in Washington, D.C., local politicians in the CNMI, politicians in Guam, carpetbaggers from Guam who were trying to make a pretty buck out of the people of the CNMI. Not just that, not just connections to Macau, connections to a casino that would soon form with an exclusive license, not just the aggregation of powerful, influential people who still run the Commonwealth. If you look at everything that the Saipan Chamber of Commerce, Hanmi, and so many of their surrogates are trying to continue to sell the people of the Mariana Islands, it's all the same stuff. But it wasn't just that. These journalists connected this conspiracy all the way up to the Chinese Communist Party. And then, in the height of this guy's popularity, running for another term in office, he ran for and he won another term in office in 2018. A year later, the FBI raids the governor's office, Ralph Torres' home, the offices of his brother's law firm, legal offices of IPI. And as part of the warrant that a federal judge signed, the crimes indicated and alleged, or for which they had probable cause to conduct these raids, included wire fraud, money laundering, and foreign interference in a United States election. You had all of this stuff happening, all of these things being revealed, all of this evidence, and judges don't just sign off on warrants willy-nilly. So you had all of that going on. And then a month later, very new Kandit news. I'm sure people in the CNMI had no idea what to think of us, but just this ragtag outfit. We get a messenger message. At the time, a confidential source, but she has since given me permission to reveal that she was the source, a private citizen, Selena Babalta. She asked me, would you like to see some documents? And so over the course of several days, she begins to furnish me online over WhatsApp hundreds of pages out of thousands of pages of documents that she secured through Open Government Act demands for public records. And when I saw the first sheet of paper, I said, I absolutely want to see the rest. Thousands of pages of forensic evidence that former Governor Ralph Torres, governor at the time, had fleeced the people of the Commonwealth in hundreds of thousands of dollars in utility payments to his private home, which included a private commercial piggery on it, first-class travel, which is illegal in the CNMI, shopping sprees, not just at Target and Home Depot and hunting stores in Idaho, but even even in the DFS shops in the airports, the several airports that he was going around. The use of 26 different credit cards for reimbursements. And we break this story, and there is all of this pushback from the Republicans in the legislature at the time. The governor's office didn't want to talk to us at all. These Republicans in the legislature, they didn't want to talk about this. They thought that it was disrespectful. They felt that it was better that we didn't talk about this because this is just how the way things are done. Meanwhile, you had people still suffering from the effects of the previous typhoon, still living in tents. For all of the millions of dollars in U2 funds, reimbursement funds from FEMA, it seemed that the only people who were getting rich were the people who are already rich. And everybody else was getting crumbs in exchange for supporting Ralph Torres. And so finally, the very few, they weren't even Democrats at the time, very few independents who later became Democrats. The very few independents in I believe it was the 20th Commonwealth Legislature, they started to make noise. They picked off from where the pioneers of all of that protest from the previous decade had left off. And they said, look, we have these documents. And they entered it into the record. And an investigation started. But the Republicans who controlled the House and the Senate wouldn't let that happen. So guess what the people of the Commonwealth did? They kicked their asses out of office and installed Democrats and independents. And some of those Republicans, the same ones who were apprehensive about doing anything about Ralph Torres and the crony Republicans, some of them who weren't cronies of Ralph Torres, but were either afraid of him or were just on for the gravy train, they became independents, some of them. They changed their stripes. And we're seeing those stripes turn back to red after all of these years. And in between this time, there was the impeachment trial. There was the impeachment, then the impeachment trial. The Republicans did their best. Ralph Torres wasn't removed from office because the Senate was able to kick the Democrats and the independents from the House out of the proceedings of what should have been a fair trial but was not. And so 2 elections pass. Both elections, a very clear mandate from the voters. We're through with Torres. We're through with the Republicans. Most of all, we're through with the corruption and the BS. The voters, they elected what's colloquially known as the INDEMs, the Independent and Democrat Coalition, thinking that they were going to do something about corruption. My dear friends, hardly anything's been done about corruption. And while it's true that the current administration, the independent administration of Arnold Palacios and David Apateng, are nowhere near the corruption of Ralph Torres. And while it's true that what the Palacios-Apateng administration inherited was the mess of Ralph Torres, was just the destruction left behind by Ralph Torres. And they've had to pick up the pieces, and they have steered the ship of state financially. The economy is in shambles. But what else? What else has been done? Not very much by the majority of the leaders of the Commonwealth, especially from the INDEMs, who were very clearly elected on this mandate. And it's very disappointing. I'm not talking about all of them, but I am talking about most of them. And so in the midst of all this, in 2022, the Attorney General, Edward Manabusin, his office, they pursue charges against Ralph Torres for the several crimes that, at the time, it was for contempt of the legislature because of Ralph Torres failing to appear to answer questions before the impeachment trial and before the impeachment. And so all of that continues on. There's a case. November comes around. Ralph Torres and Arnold Palacios advance in the elections. In the runoff election in late November, Arnold Palacios waxes Ralph Torres at the polls. Arnold Palacios becomes the governor in January of 2023. And then a couple months later, the government of the CNMI, they find this lawyer in Texas. And this lawyer in Texas, they find out he's Harvard educated, and he has this reputation for going after corrupt political officials. And so they invite him. They say, hey, Jim Bob Kingman, can you come to the CNMI so that you can be the special prosecutor on this case we have against our former governor? And Jim Bob Kingman, he accepts the invitation. He reads up about the CNMI and the Marianas. He learns as much as he can. But he isn't ready whatsoever for the reality of the situation, the entrenchment of corruption, how endemic it is, and how, just like in Guam, in the CNMI, it really is just a few people wielding such tremendous power and influence that they've created an oligarchy over the system. And so Jim Bob Kingman, he comes in and he begins to prosecute this case. He begins to write what was not a complete prosecution from the start, but that was since 2020. It's now 2025. And so Ralph Torres has not seen one day of trial. And there has been quite a bit that has happened since this case started. None of it resulting in criminal justice. None of it resulting. You have all of this, everything that we know happened, everything that's been reported, everything that's been uncovered, all of the interest that there has been, all of the mandate that there has been for criminal justice. A mandate to the new government, to these indems, to do something. And what has been done? Who's been doing anything? And so when I went to Saipan in January of this year, I took a chance and I asked Jim Bob Kingman, can I interview you? Can I find out? I just like to find out what's going on with this case. And he said yes. And so on January 12, I interviewed him. And it's taken quite a while for me to write this story and to publish. There's a whole lot of stuff that happened in life in between then, and a lot of corruption stuff here in Guam. But also, a lot of thought had to go into this piece. And what Jim Bob Kingman told me about what's been going on, my very first thought was, are you going to quit? After hearing his story, he said no, he ain't going to quit. They're not going to bring him down. Here is what, for those of you who want to see criminal justice, for those of you who have been wondering, when is Ralph Torres ever going to see the inside of a courtroom? What about everybody else who helped? Everybody else who was an accomplice to the fleecing of more than $1 billion in public funds over the last decade? Who's going to be held accountable for that dilapidating behemoth in the middle of Garapan? That all the people who were smart about it were saying from the beginning, this is a bad idea. Why do we have an exclusive license? How are we going to allow this building to be built on top of grave sites, ancient grave sites? Isn't this kind of just too big to be in the center of the tourist district? Isn't this going to upset tourism? What about the effects of casino gambling? What is that going to do to our people? The drug problem, the issues with money laundering, the issues with wire fraud, the issues with communist Chinese influence in the CNMI. And on and on and on, we can go over the grievances of the people of the Commonwealth that have resulted in nothing but an economic depression that is causing so much suffering among the people of the Commonwealth and has caused so many people of the Commonwealth to leave Saipan, Tinian, and Rhoda to go live in Guam, California, Idaho, Washington, Texas, Missouri. All the while, Ralph Torres is free. The people in his administration, his cronies, those who clearly committed crimes, they're free. And don't think for a second that the federal government is going to come in and do something. It's quite clear, because of Ralph Torres's relationship with current President Trump, because U.S. Attorney Sean Anderson is a Trump appointee, it's quite clear that there is not going to be criminal justice from the federal side of things. So the only hope for criminal justice is in the local court system, is in the local criminal justice system. That means the only hope there is Attorney General Edward Manabusin and corruption prosecutor Jim Bob Kingman. But over the past 2 years, what has happened to this case, what has happened to Jim Kingman, and what has happened for Ralph Torres in the CNMI court system has been an absolute injustice. You have the full weight of this endemically corrupt system up against this one guy, Jim Bob Kingman. The full weight of this corrupt system that from the beginning managed to delay, with the consent of judges, managed to delay criminal justice in this case. Continuance after continuance after continuance, with judges allowing the constant questioning of the credentials of Jim Bob Kingman, an established prosecutor from Texas who has a Harvard law degree, judges in the CNMI and brought into the CNMI, allowing all of these delays over the matter of his credentials. And then the shuffling of judges. And then judges coming in from Guam, and every ruling that they're making, unprecedented stuff, all in favor of Ralph Torres, so that last year, Jim Bob Kingman and the Office of the Attorney General are disqualified from the case. And the judge pro tem in the CNMI, a judge from Guam, even though there were questions about impartiality, questions about conflicts of interest, remained on the case, said that the executive branch could appoint a special prosecutor. No one seems to understand whose authority that is. In the meantime, the Attorney General had formulated, together with the Department of Public Safety and the Office of the Public Auditor, which, by the way, the Office of the Public Auditor has the ability to issue investigative subpoenas and to file charges. They haven't, even though they're part of this public integrity task force that was created with them, with DPS, and with OAG. So they have this public integrity task force. Jim Kingman was the lead on the task force. It was meeting. DPS doesn't come to the table. OPA stopped coming to the table. Just like that, in January of this year. just stopped coming to the table. Didn't say why. Didn't provide any notice either that they would stop coming to the table. And when I asked Governor Palacios about this, he had no idea that the Public Integrity Task Force stopped working. He had no idea that his own Department of Public Safety stopped coming to the table. He had no idea that OPA stopped coming to the table. And so when I asked him, are you going to do anything about it? He said, yeah, I'm going to order DPS back to the table, and I'm going to talk to OPA. When I asked OPA, Dora de Leon Guerrero, the acting public auditor, what happened? How come you guys stopped coming to the Public Integrity Task Force meetings? And she emailed and she said that, in a nutshell, she said, oh, it's because we were informed we weren't going to meet anymore. And so I asked Jim Kingman, I said, this is what Dora de Leon Guerrero said. Did you tell her that, this, and that? And he says, no. No, I'm not sure why she's saying that. So I follow up with Dora de Leon Guerrero and I say, hey, Jim Kingman says that this is not true. Ghosted. No response from OPA. In this investigative piece that I wrote up, I go through all this stuff based on this interview with Jim Kingman. And it will make you, reading it, it will make you sick. Writing it made me sick, made me disgusted. Just about my assumption is not that these people are stupid. That's not my assumption, or incompetent even. I think the people who are in positions of power, who have either turned the other way, looked the other way, decided not to do anything, or engaged in doing things to stop this prosecution from happening, from stopping the prosecution of corruption, are all complicit. They're not too dumb. They're not incompetent. It's not because they didn't know. It's because there's a system to protect. And Jim Kingman, he talks about this in this interview. I put some great quotes in there from him about what is needed beyond him in order for there to be true change, not just in the prosecution of Ralph Torres and those who were his cronies who fleeced the people of the Commonwealth of more than $1 billion. There are at least 3 people in the government you've elected into your government who actually appear to give a damn about this issue. At least 3. Governor Palacios had no problem talking to me about this, and he had no problem committing not just to talking to DPS or ordering DPS and talking to OPA, but in supporting both the legal and the financial resources Jim Kingman would need to do his job efficiently and with integrity. Things like supporting the passage of Marissa Flores's investigative subpoena legislation, things like providing assets, as in human resources, investigators, and other sorts of assets to Jim Kingman's office, speaking with the Attorney General to see whether there's anything that the governor can do to support the Attorney General. And by the way, in my discussions with people on this piece, I did not get the sense that Attorney General Edward Manabusin is standing in the way of anything. In fact, the sense I got was that there is a wall to prevent sort of conflicts of interest or to prevent bad things from happening. There's a wall between Jim Kingman and Attorney General Edward Manabusin to make sure everything is on the up and up. And so, it's possible that some of this stuff Attorney General Edward Manabusin doesn't know because he's not supposed to know. Maybe he'll find out through this venue. Then there's Marissa Flores with the House of Representatives, who since last term has been trying to help Jim Kingman. Other members of the House tagged along, said yes to her subpoena legislation. It went to the Senate, where it died because of Edith de Leon Guerrero, who the voters kicked out of office last year. Unfortunately, the Republicans are in control of the Senate. So I don't know whether that legislation will make it past the legislature to arrive on the governor's desk, unless the people start speaking out. And not just the voters, but also the political establishment. Because when's the last time you heard the political establishment say anything about Jim Kingman and his campaign against corruption? When is the last time you heard the CNMI Democratic Party say anything about Kingman and the case against Ralph Torres? I've heard crickets. And this is the party that's supposed to be all about anti-corruption. It was why it went from zero to something of a force to be reckoned with over the last two elections, on the promise that they were the anti-corruption people. They were the fiscal responsibility people. They were the transparency people. Where are you now, Democrats? There's one Democrat who, like Marissa Flores, has been supportive of Kingman, has called out the corruption, has followed up, and that's Senator Selena Babalta, who the day after, I think, it was the day after that I interviewed Jim Kingman, so it must have been January 13 of 2025, I asked her, after talking to Jim Kingman, is there anything you can do? Is there any way that you can support this guy? Is there anything, what can you do from the Senate? And here's what Senator Babalta had to say. I think it's an 8-minute interview. Senator Babalta, thank you again for your time.
Thank you. Thank you, Troy.
I interviewed the corruption prosecutor, Jim Bob Kingman, and among his general concerns is the lack of support that he has received since he became the corruption prosecutor. In a sense, if I can paraphrase what he said, it's not directly what he said, but he's frustrated. Mm-hmm. He was brought to the CNMI. He was invited to the CNMI to look into things. He said that absolutely, former Governor Ralph Torres and members of his administration committed crimes, but the criminal justice system here is so systemically broken and needs certain fixes that it has become untenable, though he will not quit on the people of the CNMI. What kind of support can you guarantee to Jim Bob Kingman so that he is able to prosecute corruption and has a better sense that the system is not broken?
Thank you. And I feel what Council Kingman is going through in terms of his frustration. We also here, or I in particular, feel frustrated in the judicial process here. I think a lot could be done to improve it. I also think that more support in terms of resources should be given to Mr. Kingman. We did ask him to come out here to prosecute and be so he's an isolated attorney within the Attorney General's office. And I have spoken to the powers that be in the Attorney General's office to provide more support to him in terms of whether it's administrative staff or office supplies. I've, talked to the Attorney General's office about it. And I'm not sure at this point whether any support has been given to Mr. Kingman.
According to him, is not. Well, he said that he would like to have at least 5 investigators and just very basic office supplies. Is this something that the legislature is able to appropriate funds to accomplish?
Yes, we can appropriate funds for that, but it would have to go through the Attorney General's office budget because Mr. Kingman is an assistant Attorney General.
But the legislature can say these funds are for specific
reasons.
Would you be willing to introduce that legislation?
Unfortunately, Troy, in the Senate, we can't introduce appropriation bills.
It must originate in the House.
That is correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
The second
But I'm
thing,
willing to lobby to have it included.
okay.
Yeah.
The second thing is the investigative subpoena power. So the courts ruled, was that last year or the year before, that for whatever reason, the Attorney General's office cannot issue subpoenas as part of their investigations, which is a tool that, attorneys general across
The United
the United
States and
States
Guam,
have, and
Hawaii,
Guam have.
Idaho. I've looked that up, and I made in the 23rd legislature, Representative Marissa Flores, I think it was, who
Yes.
introduced what we coined the AGO subpoena bill, and I was going to propose amendments to it to make it conducive and to address the concerns of the 13 attorneys who wrote to then Senate President De Leon Guerrero. Unfortunately, it was referred back to committee, and I had repeatedly asked that it be pulled out of committee so I can introduce the amendments to address the concerns of the attorneys, the defense attorneys who wrote their concerns to then Senate President, and it never materialized.
Is this something that can be reintroduced in this legislature?
Yes, it certainly can be, and I think what is required at this point is to sit down with the Bar Association and address their concerns as best as we can. But you are right, attorney generals across the United States, including territories like Guam, the state of Hawaii, the West Coast states, I've looked it up, and I've even sought the assistance of the National Conference of State Legislatures, of which the CNMI is a member of, to provide me that information, which states have subpoena powers given to their Attorney General's office, and practically all of the United States.
What are your thoughts on the fact that it's been 3 to 4 years since you began your House investigation into former Governor Ralph Torres' corruption and the corruption of his administration? It's been 2 years since you got into the Senate and the Independent Democrat Coalition swept power in the government. It's been 2 years since Jim Bob Kingman was brought on by the Attorney General's office to prosecute corruption, and yet there has not been a single trial victory against former Governor Ralph Torres or anyone in his administration regarding corruption. Your thoughts?
I am extremely disappointed in what has transpired over the last 4 years. We put our sweat and blood into those investigations, and clearly there is evidence in those documents and the evidence we provided and published of criminal activity. I'm frustrated. It begs the question, is the government now out to intentionally deter any prosecution of any of those actors that committed these activities?
When you say the government, do you mean the Attorney General's office?
Everybody involved, including the Office of Public Auditor. They have our reports. They requested for our reports, and I understand that they're not. They don't publicly divulge any investigation going on, but it's been 4 long years, Troy, and it is disappointing to say the least.
What do you think of the fact that the OPA pulled out of the Financial Crimes and White Collar Task Force?
I don't know their reasoning for that. I just recently heard about that. I would have to look into it, why they pulled out. So I'll reserve. I don't want to speculate anything right now. I will have to get in touch with their office.
Wasn't the OPA appointed by former Governor Ralph Torres?
We don't currently have a permanent public auditor. We have an acting, and that.
Sorry, there's a second part to that interview, and I'm going to save that for a follow-up story because it goes into other things. But I do want to concentrate on a few things, or on a couple of things before signing off and allowing you guys to read this full story, which is packed with details, packed with explanations, to arrive at the answer as to Why has there been no criminal justice yet? I think it's safe to say that there is an expectation among observers that there will be an effort, like Selena Babata was saying, to actively deter criminal justice, to prevent an effort within the government or within the establishment to prevent Jim Bob Kingman from doing his job, to prevent him from succeeding in his campaign against corruption. You have to consider the motives here. What possible motive does Jim Bob Kingman have aside from pursuing criminal justice? He ain't making money out of this. He's probably losing money by moving his shop from his lucrative career in Texas and coming to the CNMI, taking a gigantic pay cut. He is the most hated person in the corrupt political establishment of the CNMI. He has been thwarted over the last 2 years at every single step. His credentials being questioned, even though he's Harvard educated and has a series of trial victories under his belt. You have to look at the motives here. And for those in the political establishment, those who are pursuing and pushing for this China, we got to get in bed with the Chinese Communist Party, those who so vociferously oppose looking at what was done during the Torres administration by saying things like, oh, that was in the past. We got to move on. You would expect that the people who run corporate CNMI, the various segments of the political establishment in the government, from those in the legislature to those in the executive branch, might be in on this effort to deter criminal justice, might be in this effort to make Jim Kingman go away. The last place that you would expect any sort of corruption, any sort of conspiracy, any sort of collaboration with the criminal actors is in the judiciary. And yet it has been the judiciary that has allowed the slow down of criminal justice, that has participated in this delay, that has actively thwarted Jim Kingman and the Office of the Attorney General, that decided that the Office of the Attorney General, out of all places in the CNMI government, does not have investigative subpoena authority. Yet the public auditor does. And the public auditor is not doing anything. The public auditor can charge these cases, hasn't done anything. Pulls out of the Public Integrity Task Force. I digress. I went off on a tangent there. Going back to the judiciary. The judiciary, not just participating, but leading the way in thwarting this investigation. You have to wonder, if you've been observing what's been going on over the past 2 years, whether the judiciary has been corrupted. And then we look at what Judge Kenneth Govendo in the Shane Villanueva case. And Judge Govendo, also disqualified Jim Kingman from that case. Also, when Shane Villanueva took the stand, refused to allow Robbie Glass to cross-examine Shane Villanueva. Renders a judgment, because it was a bench trial, not a trial by jury, renders a judgment in favor of Shane Villanueva that is the exact opposite of a decision and order from the previous judge on the case, Judge Naraha. After he makes his decision from the bench, he says, quote, Mr. Kingman is a liability to this government. He is arrogant. He thinks he is omnipotent, and maybe it is time for him to head back to Texas. I have observed several trials. I have never, ever heard a judge talk like that in such a prejudicial way. And so I looked it up because I'm not a judge. I'm not a lawyer. Maybe I missed something. So I looked it up. I looked up the standards for behavior of federal judges, which should apply as a standard everywhere. And what Judge Govendo said following that bench trial is absolutely not allowed. So where is everybody? Where is the clamor? Not just for criminal justice, but to understand and to report to the people so that the people are kept in the loop. What's been happening over the past 2 years? Why the entire system has descended upon Jim Bob Kingman to crush him and get rid of him, when all the guy is trying to do is bring Ralph Torres to criminal justice. With all the evidence over the past 10 years, with all the reports, the forensic evidence, what people have seen before their very eyes, the number of people who have been hurt, the economic condition of the Commonwealth, the financial downfall of the government, things that everybody is suffering through, trying to figure out. Ralph Torres did those things. And to this day, he has not been held accountable. Where is everyone in the political establishment elected with a mandate to have done something about this, to at the very least throw their support behind Attorney General Edward Manabusin and corruption prosecutor Jim Bob Kingman? Where is the Office of the Public Auditor? Where is the Department of Public Safety? Where are the members of the House aside from Marissa Flores? Where are the senators aside from Selena Babauta? Where is everyone whom the people are counting on for justice, for criminal justice, for accountability, for everything that was measured up in the last 2 elections by the voters? And as you'll see in this story, Jim Bob Kingman has a remedy for it all. And the remedy, my dear friends, is you and me. Just like in the last 2 elections, and we cannot just limit ourselves to elections. We have to speak up. We have to challenge the leaders, the leadership, where CNMI corporate is trying to take us down that rabbit hole again. We have to stand up and say, no, enough with your BS. This song and dance, it's old. It's gotten us nowhere. It's gotten you guys very rich, but look at the rest of us. And so I ask you, my dear friends, before you go to sleep tonight, read this account, read the story. You'll be just as disgusted as I am. For Kandit News, I'm Troy Torres. Good night.
We got that dynamite. We got that dynamite.
Find the perfect ride for you today with the New Year New Ride sales event at Guam Auto Spot. Get behind the wheel of the 2024 Outlander Sport, starting at just $22,995 or only $156 per paycheck. Visit GuamAutospot.com or call 671-478-AUTO.
Find a plan that goes with your flow. Get unlimited local talk, text, and data at the most affordable rate with Unlimited Flow Postpaid, only at Docomo Pacific.